Dear students, myself Dr. Fatima Sultana. Today's topic is wildlife crime and laws. We are going to learn about the various crimes which have been occurred in the trading of wildlife and the laws which have been implemented to control this wildlife crime. Now, what is wildlife crime? Wildlife crime includes offenses like poaching, killing, or disturbing protected species or damaging their breeding and resting places. Wherever there is wildlife and where they are either in protected areas or in unprotected areas, in conservation areas or community conservation areas. Now in those areas, if the animals have are being poached, that is they are killed, hunted, or if they are disturbed during the breeding season or the resting places, if they are disturbed or the area is damaged, that all comes under the wildlife crime. Now, why prevention? What is the need for the prevention? This extreme pressures of wildlife crime, and this can push the animals and plant species closer to extinction and cause animals unnecessary pain and suffering. Now, we are all concerned about the conservation of the wildlife, or we can say conservation of the biodiversity. And this is actually for ourselves, because if we want to live, we have to conserve this biodiversity. Now, if there is extreme pressure of wildlife crime on these animals and plants, because these will be pushed closer towards extinction, and if these plants and animals get extincted, we are also going to extinct. So we are actually saving ourselves, but there is a lot of pressure due to this wildlife crime, which is causing unnecessary pain and suffering to the animals and plants. Now, what are the various methods of crime? There are different types of methods the with the help of which these poachers, they are or hunters, they use the techniques to kill the wildlife. For example, pit poaching. The the criminals, they will dig a big hole and the animal falls in it, and then they easily trap it. Or electrocution, they give electric current to the animal. Or shooting, poisoning. These are all various methods of crime. Other methods are trap and snares. They hide the snares in bushes and the animal get trapped in it. Nets are being used to trap the birds. Even stick and glue. They take a long stick, uh, fix some glue on it, and by touching the animal or the bird, they trap that bird. From the holes or the nest, the eggs are being taken away. This is also one type of method in which the uh, either the young ones are picked up or the eggs are picked up from the nest. Harpooning. This is used in catching the whales or the turtles from the oceans. Throwing, that is putting some net in the water and taking out the corals, shells from and marine invertebrates from the oceans. Digging for underground animals like snakes, lizards, porcupines. The person digs and takes out those animals from their holes. Collecting plants from wild. This is also one method of crime. Now, who are all involved in wildlife crime? Professionals like poachers, middlemen, transporters, smugglers, pharmacies, and other end users linked with bigger mafia groups. Opportunists, small time criminals attracted by high profit, low risk. Some people from the villages, they are being offered a huge amount, that will give this amount, you help us to locate the tiger or the animal so that the poachers can kill it. Then little investigated group, there are a few tribal groups which were involved in this wildlife crime. This Tibetans and Mogyas, Bagadias. Now, trade in wildlife. The wildlife crime is occurred because trading is being done. A huge amount of this skin, claws, horns, antlers, these are all being traded out, and it costs a huge amount for them. They earn money by doing this poaching. Large number of species under threat from poaching and illegal trade are tiger and other big cats, rhinoceros, elephants, star tortoise, pangolin. These are all being killed for the skin or the tusk of the elephants, horn of the rhinoceros, and star tortoises and pangolins. Outside market driven poaching. Huge amount of criminal crime this trading for wildlife is being done outside, that is China market. It uh, takes a lot of animals because they make medicines from this wildlife. You can see how the animals are being birds are being trapped and transported outside. Plants like red sanders, cycas, sorcerer, orchids, and are also under great threat. We all know that red sander, these trees, the timber is very costly. So plants are also being illegally traded outside. You can see the whole seizure of these tree trunks. They were being seized by the officials, and they were being illegally trading these trunks of the trees. Even sandalwood is being earning a lot of money for these poachers. Even the shells and corals, they are also being illegally traded outside, and it costs them economy. You can see the corals and the shells, they are beautifully used as ornaments. Therefore, they fetch for good amount of money to these poachers. One of the largest seizure in the year 2000, four tiger skins, 70 leopard skins, 221 other skins, and more than 18,000 leopard claws, 132 tiger claws, and 175 kg of bone was seized in this when the officials of forest have seized such lot amount of these tiger skins and all which were being traded outside. Now items can include elephant ivory, rhino horn, tiger parts, and live animals such as primates and reptiles. These are all being included in wildlife crime because the tusk of the elephant is earning a lot of amount. The tigers are being hunted and killed only just to extract the tusk because the ivory is very costly. And rhinos are killed just to take out that horn on the single one horn rhinoceros. And tiger, it's dead tiger or a living tiger, the dead tiger fetch them more money than a living tiger because every part of the tiger is being illegally traded. Now, not just trade in exotic species but also wildlife and plants from India. From India, lot of wildlife and plants are being traded out illegally, and it is they earn money from this. It is a profitable illicit trade in the world, and it stands fourth in number. Cites it is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Fauna and Flora, and the treaty was signed in 1973, which protects wildlife from overexploitation. The responsibility for the enforcement of the laws protecting our wildlife rests with the police services, forest services, and police services, and wildlife is protected under Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Since this act was implemented in 1972, the trading of this wildlife, hunting and poaching, all was restricted under this act. Now, how the wildlife crime is affected? Large town financier traders, they give money to the poachers or the village level middleman, small town processor, or local consumer. Then this is being transported to other countries like China, which are overseas consumers. These are a few major hotspots for illegal wildlife trade in India. You can see the triangular marks marked in this Indian map, that these are the major hotspots. Now, important provision of laws governing wildlife crime. What are the laws which are governing to protect the wildlife crime? The act which have an importance on wildlife enforcement in India include Wildlife Protection Act in 1972. This 1972 act was amended in 1982. The Indian Act Forest in 1927. The other state amendments were the Forest Act in 1980, the Biological Diversity Act 2002, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, the Criminal Procedure Code 1974, the Indian Penal Code 1860, the Arms Act 1959, the Foreign Trade Act 1992. These are the various acts which control the various illegal trading of wildlife crime. Now, Wildlife Protection Act, which is very important for the protection of wildlife. It covers the protection of wildlife, including birds, their nest and their eggs, wild animals, mammals, and wild plants. There are many sections which are, every section has a particular law which acts under this 1972 Act. For example, Section 9, it prohibits hunting. Prohibition of hunting, that is, hunting is restricted in the sanctuaries and protected areas, wherever protected as well as an unprotected area. Hunting is totally prohibited under this section. Section 17A and Section 17H, that is protection of specified plants, which come under schedules. We all know that there are five schedules in Wildlife Protection Act: Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The Schedule 1 is the most important, in which all the endangered species have been kept, which are highly threatened, critically endangered, and are on the verge of extinction. Those animals and plants are kept under the Schedule 1. Section 27, restriction on entry in sanctuary. Section 27(1), no person other than a public servant on duty, that is the forest guards, forest rangers, forest officers. They can go, otherwise no other person can go without permission. A person who has been permitted by chief wildlife warden or the authorized officer to reside within the limits of the sanctuary. A person who has any right over immovable property within the limits of sanctuary. Because we all know that man and animal were living together in harmony. But now the areas have been marked as sanctuary and protected areas. So there may be a few people who are having agriculture land in the sanctuary area. So those persons who have any right for immovable property within the limits of sanctuary are given permission. A person passing through the sanctuary along a public highway. There are highways which are crossing the sanctuaries. The dependents of the person referred to in a clause A, B, and C shall enter or reside in the sanctuary except under and in accordance with the conditions of a permit granted under section 28. Only those person can go inside the sanctuary. Now, section 27.2, every person shall, so long as he resides in the sanctuary, be bound to. Now, if the person has been given permission to live, stay in that area, so he is bound to prevent the commission in the sanctuary of an offense against this act. He should look after any offense being occurred over there, where there is reason to believe that any such offense against this act has been committed in such sanctuary, to help in discovering and arresting the offender. So the person will help the officials of the forest department to arrest the offender, to report the death of any wild animal, and to safeguard its remains until the chief wildlife warden or the authorized officer takes charge of thereof. That is, the person who is residing in the sanctuary, if he comes to know about some death of any wild animal, so he will take care of it until the chief wildlife warden or some authorized person will come and take charge of it, to extinguish any fire in such sanctuary. Now, for example, if fire has been blasted over there, so he should extinguish that fire from spreading in the forest. He should prevent or inform the officials about the fire break. Now, other important provision of the Act, Section 29, destruction, etc., in a sanctuary is prohibited without a permit. That is, no person shall destroy, exploit, or remove any wildlife, including forest produce, from a sanctuary, or destroy or damage or divert the habitat of any wild animal, stop or enhance the flow of water in to or outside the sanctuary, except under and in accordance with a permit granted by chief wildlife warden, and no such permit shall be granted. And section 35.6 is for national parks. So the person is cannot destroy or exploit or remove any part of the forest, whether it is animal, whether it is a plant, or even water diversion is not allowed. So you can see that how strict is this Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Now other sections like section 30, that causes fire prohibited. Section 31, prohibition of entry into sanctuary with weapon. No weapon is allowed to taken inside the sanctuary. 35A, power to remove encroachment not below ACF. And section 39, wild animals, etc., to government property. It comes under the government property. Section 50, seize animal, trap, tools, vehicle, arrest him without warrant. Under section 50, the officials of the forest department can seize any animal which has been trapped, or the tools which have been used, the vehicle which have been used. They can arrest them without warrant. See how strict is this act. There is no need of any warrant to seize the person or catch the person doing this offense of wildlife hunting or poaching. Section 51, penalties in any contravention of the act or rule, with or without imprisonment. Penalties can be put on the person under this section 51. Now, as I have told you, the Act 1972, there was an amendment in 1982. And what was this amendment? It was it introduced a provision permitting the capture and transportation of wild animals for scientific management of animal population. For example, the tigers from Ranthambore are being shifted to Sariska. So that was for the betterment and the dispersal of the wild cat tiger. Similarly, tiger from Ranthambore to Mukundra Hills National Park, Mukundra Hills Tiger Reserve. So this comes under this amendment. That is the provision permitting the capture and transportation of wild animals for the scientific management of animal population. The animal population, that is the tiger population in Ranthambore was increasing according to the area. So, for the betterment of them, they were being shifted to Sariska and Mukundra Tiger Reserve. Now, how wildlife crime can be controlled? Through well organized information gathering unit to support field staff in prevention, detection, and investigation of wildlife crime is necessary. A good network of information gathering should be there so that the persons can inform the field staff about the offense and they can help in the prevention. The steps proposed in the article, if followed in principle, wildlife crime can be controlled to minimum. So, under all these sections, if properly they are being implemented, wildlife crime can be controlled to the minimum. Thank you so much.